Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. We discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a lot to get into. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. Let's get right into today's episode. Starting off with our good old friend, Teague, who a few episodes ago said that the Orlando Magic weren't even better than the Detroit Pistons or the Atlanta Hawks. And then, I guess, seemingly retracted that in some shape or form because he apparently believes that we can beat the Knicks, who are the second highest projected team to come out of the Eastern Conference, only behind the Cleveland Cavaliers. He particularly said that he believes that the Orlando Magic have the big wings to be able to guard the New York Knicks in a real way. He says that I think the Magic can beat the Knicks. They got super big wings. The former championship guard highlights the Magic's height from top to bottom of the roster. Most of their guards are 6'5" or taller. Also, Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner are 6'10". The length and versatility of the team are some of the reasons why they are a great defense. They were a great defense last season. The Magic and Knicks have a case to be named as early favorites in the Eastern Conference, given all the talent on each roster. According to DraftKings, both are in the top three. Again, the Knicks are 2 and the Magic are 3. The Magic still hold an advantage from a defensive standpoint, but the Knicks have more successful playoff experience. B. Hen on the podcast believes that Paulo Banchero is going to be a top three MVP. Is going to finish top 3 in MVP this upcoming season. Like I said last podcast, Teague be Teagan. My man's literally walked back his statement about the Atlanta Hawks and the Detroit Pistons by talking about this, because the same reason that he highlights that the Orlando Magic can guard and really shut down the New York Knicks is the exact reason why they would be able to guard a team like the Atlanta Hawks at such a high level. It's very similar. If we're being honest, the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks are built very, very similarly. Heliocentric point guard, Trey Young, Jalen Brunson. Defensive wings on the side that can shoot the three ball at a high rate, Dyson Daniels, Zachary Risachet. For the Knicks, they have Mikal Bridges at the 2, and OG Anunoby plays the 4 for them. They also have Josh Hart. Ball handling wing that gives them secondary shot creation, you can call that either Mikal Bridges or you can call that OG Anunoby. Rim running center that does nothing really besides shot block, Mitchell Robinson, Onyeka Okongwu. Don't get me wrong, the biggest difference, oh, by the way, the New York Knicks have Karl Anthony Towns. Guess who the Atlanta Hawks' Karl Anthony Towns now is? Kristaps Porzingis. Like, these two teams are built practically the same. These two teams are built practically the same. Yet, Teague believed that the Orlando Magic couldn't mess with the Atlanta Hawks, couldn't mess with the Detroit Pistons. But they can definitely handle the Knicks. Goes to show you how easy it is to flip-flop your opinion in today's media. And when you look at this circumstance right here, it's a clear indication. Again, the jumbo wings conversation, the overall positional versatility, size and length, and athleticism across the board for the Orlando Magic, where they don't really fit out a guy below 6'4", 6'5", outside of probably Tyus Jones and Jace Richardson. Like, all the factors that would tell you that they were good enough to handle a team like the New York Knicks tells you that not only are they good enough to be able to handle the Detroit Pistons and handle a team like the Atlanta Hawks, but that the Orlando Magic are clearly a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference given the current landscape. So, just go, like I said, 2 episodes ago I said that this was an absolute clown take, and now 2 days later, here we are, Teague saying that the Orlando Magic could beat the Knicks. Again, simple walk back. One of those things that shows that, hey, man, he knew better. He knew better not to mess with what's going on in Orlando. Orlando is building real momentum right now, and don't get me wrong, Detroit and Atlanta are on the up and up. But this idea that the Orlando Magic, both on paper And maybe on paper the Atlanta Hawks are a little bit more comparable, but on paper and in terms of what they can do from a scheme versatility standpoint, the Orlando Magic are just the better team right now. Is it by a ton? No. But is it by enough to tell you that they are definitively the third best team in the Eastern Conference at bare minimum? Yes. I think that should be more than clear by this point in the offseason. Next, interestingly enough, talking about a former Hawk, let's talk about a guy who may soon become a former Hawk according to these sports books. Let me read something to you guys that says the Orlando Magic are the betting favorite to trade for NBA star Trey Young of the Atlanta Hawks. Young is in trade rumors because the Hawks haven't offered him an extension yet. Young is eligible to sign a 4-year, $229 million extension. The talented scorer and passer will make $45.9 million next season. He can become an unrestricted free agent next offseason by declining his 2026-27 player option, with the Hawks worth $48 million. The Magic already made one big trade this offseason, acquiring Desmond Bane from the Memphis Grizzlies. It will be intriguing to see if they attempt to trade for Young. The article goes on to finish by saying Young's best game in the NBA took place on January 3rd, 2022 against the Trailblazers. He put up 56 points and 14 assists in 37 minutes. I think the reason why they ended on that particularly was to highlight how much of an offensive dynamo he can be. And I think this is so interesting because if I pull up the actual sports books betting odds, it's really interesting. They say the lead candidate is the Orlando Magic at 200 plus 250, the Brooklyn Nets at plus 290, the Sacramento Kings at plus 375, the Phoenix Suns at plus 450, the Houston Rockets at plus 575, and the Miami Heat at plus 700. So, ironically enough, the Orlando Magic are the highest rated team on the list by a decent margin, not by much, but above the Brooklyn Nets. And arguably, there are only 3 real playoff teams on this list. It depends on how you feel about Miami. So, the circumstances around a Trey Young trade would all be built around whether or not the Orlando Magic feel as though, A, they need some more star power at the guard position, which has been a discussion for the last couple of years, and B, particularly their feelings on Jalen Suggs, who would likely have to be the main piece of a Trey Young trade, right? So the next thing that has to be asked is, do the Orlando Magic have a better package than the Brooklyn Nets? Probably not, just from a draft pick equity standpoint. Do they have a better package than the Sacramento Kings? Probably not. I think that Jalen Suggs will be the best young player in a trade acquisition if we're talking about the difference between them and the Sacramento Kings. Do the Phoenix Suns, who would probably end up giving them what, Jalen Green in some capacity? That's probably the baseline of what a trade would look like. The Houston Rockets obviously have the best trade package, and the reason you could argue for the Houston Rockets to make a trade for a guy like Trey Young, right, would obviously be the fact that, he has real Southwest ties, he has real Southwest ties dating back to his time in high school, also going to college at Oklahoma. Pair that with the fact that Fred VanVleet is an expiring contract that will soon, I think they picked up his team option. And I think he may have gotten an extension, but he's a guy that obviously has a shelf life on this team. And so upgrading from Fred VanVleet to Trey Young would be something that, when you also pair it next to the potential of bringing back Kevin Durant after this season, Kevin Durant, Trey Young, Amin Thompson, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, Reed Shepard, Alperen Şengün. Like, when you go down the list, like, this Houston Rockets team would just be absolutely cracked. They're already like one of the most OD rosters across the board once they plop KD into the starting lineup. But you add Trey Young as well, and I mean, it would be absolutely insane. And it would be interesting to see what the Houston Rockets are actually willing to trade for Trey Young too, right? You probably have to give up a Reed Shepard. Do you have to take a look at a guy like Tari Eason or Amin Thompson or Jabari Smith, who you just re-signed to a long-term deal, as potential trade chips to go after a guy like that, right? But I think the Orlando Magic, don't even have like one of the best packages in this lineup, despite the fact that they are the favorites. And B, I think that if the Orlando Magic target Trey Young again, it is an indication that they do not believe in Jalen Suggs long term as part of this core four. I think that would just be the hint, because Franz, I feel like, is not being traded in this situation. I don't even know if the Atlanta Hawks would want Franz Wagner in this situation, given the fact that they already have a ton of wing depth as it is with Jalen Johnson. They also have Zachary Risachet, who both are on the uptick. You bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like, you have a lot of wing depth as it is already. So unless you plan on starting Nickeil at the 1 and then bringing in Franz Wagner as a wing position, moving Zachary Risachet to the 2, there's a bunch of different things that can take place there. But Franz Wagner, from a talent perspective, they probably would want. But in terms of from fitting around what a new rebuild would be, Jalen Suggs would probably be the meat and potatoes of a real Trey Young trade with the Orlando Magic. So the Orlando Magic would in tune be admitting that Jalen Suggs is a guy that is just not going to work, despite the fact that defensively he brings so much identity to this team. And I just don't think that the Orlando Magic are going to do that, particularly in year one with so much going on, bringing in Tyus Jones, bringing in Desmond Bane, drafting Jace Richardson and Noah Penda. I think there's so many moving pieces when it comes to their depth acquisitions this summer that I don't think they're just going to give up on Jalen Suggs in year one of what's going to be a 2 to 3 year, a legit, really 3 to 4 year window when you look at all four guys' contracts and how they're lined up. Next up, talking about contract decisions. Former NBA executive John Hollinger had some interesting words to say about the Paolo Banchero extension, touching on the fact that he believes that Banchero is a fine player, but I'm a little worried about his contract. First of all, the number isn't totally, particularly, he doesn't believe that Banchero is a max player. The Magic gave Banchero an immediate escalator to 30% of the cap, even if he makes third-team All-NBA, setting up the same situation that Detroit's Cade Cunningham and Cleveland's Evan Mobley landed in a year ago, rather than negotiating a lower number if he didn't make the first team. Hollinger compared the similarities between Banchero's deal and the five-year $225 million contract given to their other star forward, Franz Wagner, last season, by saying the Magic gave Banchero a fifth-year player option. Between the 30% Supermax and the player option, they squeezed all the potential upside out of the deal. Maybe Banchero is awesome this year, and it doesn't matter, but you don't do a contract like this unless the player is so incredible that it's a median outcome. Otherwise, the Magic gave up everything in this contract and got zero concessions. The potential for Banchero to have a Julius Randle-ish year and back in the third-team All-NBA is very real and will be a massive problem for the Magic given their luxury tax issues over the coming 4-year window. I think this is really interesting because it is fair. Although Banchero is your linchpin star at the forward position for this team and easily your franchise player, I do think you can also say two things are true. I believe that Paolo Banchero is a max-worthy player. I believe that Paolo Banchero is going to be an All-NBA caliber guy next season, which of course adds in the 30% increases, which could be dangerous, again, as Hollinger points out, from a cap flexibility standpoint. I think on the other side of that, you can also favor what Hollinger is saying in terms of saying Orlando gave up all the leverage. You gave him 30% rises. You gave him a player option on the last year, something that even a player like, for example, Ja Morant, who was coming off of being like a top 7 MVP candidate around the time that he signed his extension, he doesn't have a fifth-year player option. His fifth year is locked in. It's not even a team option. His fifth year is just, he has a straight 5-year deal. But I believe Franz Wagner also has a straight 5-year deal, as opposed to Banchero, who has a player option in the final year. So if you look across the board, Banchero got the most favorable deal that a superstar can get when coming to the negotiation table for a rookie contract extension, because he got the max. He got the max with 30% rises if you make certain thresholds like the All-NBA team, which he has a very high probability of doing this upcoming season. And you pair that with the fact that he has a player option on the end, which gives him the flexibility to get out of his deal and re-up sooner. Basically, the three pillars of negotiating a very solid contract in the NBA, especially a max contract, Paulo Banchero marked off every box. And although I think he's not as proven in the playoffs as many superstars you would want to give this kind of contract to, I do think he has the pedigree as a former number one overall pick, as a guy who I think can finish as a top 10 player in this league coming up this upcoming season, and a guy who I think is going to be a legitimate MVP candidate for majority of the year barring health. I think that this is going to pay off. Now, if Paulo Banchero is as good as we believe, it will cap strap the Orlando Magic significantly going into next season. I can tell you right now that we will probably not be seeing any real moves free agency wise from the Orlando Magic next season. I can tell you that for sure. I can also tell you that guys like Jonathan Isaac, guys like Wendell Carter Jr. are going to be on the hot seat just as much as potential cap flexibility martyrs, because they may be guys that need they may be guys that need to be moved simply to open up more cash flexibility in terms of cap space. So, the Orlando Magic it's a catch-22 situation, because if Paulo Banchero is as good as they say, as good as we believe, then the Orlando Magic are going to get past the first round. They're going to get deeper into the postseason than they've been in quite some time. Paulo Banchero is going to be an All-NBA caliber player, and people are going to be talking about the Orlando Magic all year long during this upcoming NBA season. All great things. On the back end, him being that good also means that they're going to be that much deeper into the luxury tags. This team is not going to have the flexibility to really add further talent, and they're probably going to have to trade off of guys to either go deeper into the hole, a la the Trey Young situation we just talked about a segment ago, where maybe they trade even deeper into the hole, or they do something similar to what the Boston Celtics did, where you now have to give up key pieces, a la Drew Holiday, letting Al Horford walk, things of that nature, trading Kristaps Porzingis in order to make your team affordable again. Maybe you look at Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter Jr., Jalen Suggs, as guys who have to essentially be martyrs to keep this ball rolling. And that's always going to be a tough situation. So I can see it from both sides. John Hollinger, although I think has some real facts behind why financially the Orlando Magic front office kind of allowed themselves to be fleeced here in terms of giving up any and all leverage from a front office management standpoint, because everything about this deal pretty much favors the player top to bottom. I can also say that if Paulo Banchero performs up to what the contract signs for, and also factoring in those incentives, it's typically a player you'd be willing to give the contract to. Now, I also think that Paulo Banchero has a higher likelihood of being second team All-NBA, first team All-NBA, closer to second team All-NBA than third. But he also does make a really good point about making like the Julius Randle All-NBA team, of making it on third team All-NBA. I believe Julius Randle's done it twice. I think that at bare minimum, Paulo Banchero is that caliber of player, which means we do have a real possibility of him getting that 30% riser. So all Orlando Magic fans should brace for a very quiet offseason in the 2026 summer, barring the fact that maybe they do a, not fire sale, but similar to what the Celtics did in terms of moving off of maybe some very valuable names in order to make their team a lot more fiscally responsible, I guess you could say, is the best way to phrase it. Last but not least, let's finish off with Chris Vernon of The Ringer, who had some high praise for the Orlando Magic, favoring them much higher over teams like the Atlanta Hawks and the Detroit Pistons. I don't know if he was necessarily responding to Jeff Teague's statements in this situation, but very, very interesting that those two names were the ones that were brought up in this conversation. He says, I like these teams, and I like that these teams are bringing back continuity. Now, I know what Bane brings to the table. Everybody loved Desmond Bane as soon as he got traded, as we've talked about many times, but I love Desmond Bane, and I think Bane is going to be absolutely perfect for that Orlando team. I look at it and say Atlanta is going to go through a little bit of growing pains just with the new personnel. Like, that's just the way it goes, which is fair. Vernon also goes on to say Detroit kind of brings back their guys that they played with a lot of last year. You've also got Cade going to keep getting better. He is going to be one of the best players in the league. In my opinion, Paolo could very well be a top 5 player. They were already really good last year. Then they lost Suggs, and then they lost Wagner, and then they lost the other Wagner, and then they lost Paolo, and then they just kept losing guys. If they get to run it healthy, I think that this team is going to be absolutely dynamite. They added Bane to the mix. I think they're going to be absolutely dynamite. Orlando is the safest. Atlanta, you're counting on Porzingis, and that's a hard thing to count on. And it gets a little light when you get to their bench. I really like that. I really like that Orlando team. I do. I think they're awesome, and I think that the Bane things are kind of. I think the Bane things kind of make them even more potent. They're my answer in terms of he was answering who would be the definitive top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, and he was basically locking the Orlando Magic as the 3rd best team in the East behind the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. So I think that Chris Vernon hit the nail on the head here. Continuity alone is going to favor a team like the Orlando Magic over a squad like the Atlanta Hawks because they have to work through the growing pains of bringing in guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, getting Jalen Johnson back healthy, bringing in Kristaps Porzingis, operating with Onyeka Okongwu as their primary backup, kind of similar to what it was behind a guy like Clint Capella, but there's also situations where Kristaps Porzingis may end up starting at the 4, Zachary Ricochet comes off the bench, and Onyeka Okongwu is their starting 5. You have to figure out what that looks like. On the other side with the Detroit Pistons, they are mainly bringing back a lot of the same guys, but some of their most interesting contributors, and Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. are both not on the team. Malik Beasley could always come back on a very lucrative deal after everything with his off the court issues gets solved. But other than that, this team is running it back, but they're preying on internal improvement for a team that showed real signs of growth last year, but didn't do necessarily anything world-breaking to tell you that now they deserve to be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. They didn't make any real moves of note this offseason, and they're pretty much banking on Cade Cunningham to continue on the direction that he's in order to raise the ships that are around him. And I think he's very capable of doing so. And I think Asar Thompson's a really solid player who could continue to grow as well. But again, especially if we're just playing the on paper game, Detroit is not better than Atlanta, and Detroit is not better than Orlando. So all the points that Chris Vernon points out, not only about the continuity, but also from a talent perspective, also he's a big, as you could hear, he's a huge fan of Desmond Bane as a player, and I'm not super surprised by that. Chris Vernon has real relations in terms of covering the Memphis Grizzlies a pretty decent amount, so he knows a lot about what Desmond Bane brings to the table. So I'm not really surprised by that by too much either. I think that Chris Vernon hit this one right on the nail on the head. And the biggest standing statement is that Paolo Banchero being a potential top 5 player in the NBA by the end of the year, at least for this season. I think there's some real credence to that, right? Obviously, some of the mainstay players that are going to get the first crack are SGA, Jokic, Giannis, Luka. Those are going to be the first 4 guys that come to name, right? But that 5th spot, let's see what Kevin Durant does. Let's see what Kawhi Leonard looks like. Let's see what Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson. Let's see, right? Jason Tatum usually locks up that 5th spot. He's not playing next season. Tyrese Halliburton usually is a guy that is in the conversation. At least last season, he was starting to really boost himself into the conversation of being a top 10 to top 12 guy. He's not in the mix this year, right? So there's a lot of intrigue there about that 5th spot. There's a lot of names that could potentially be slotted in that 5th space. And Paolo Banchero has a real chance with the team success and individual counting stats to be the guy who takes that 5th spot. Victor Wembanyama and him might be the guys that are battling for that spot. Obviously, I'm going to roll with my dog Paolo Banchero, but Victor Wembanyama is quite a horse to get over in the totem pole of, ranking these guys. So it'll be interesting. So my question of the day for this podcast is, if you were to rank the entire Eastern Conference, actually, let's not do the entire Eastern Conference. That's a little ridiculous. Rank the top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference, and particularly tell me where the Orlando Magic fall in the Eastern Conference standing for you. Do you believe that they are just easily the third best team in the Eastern Conference, as many sports books and analysts have dubbed them as? Or do you actually think, given our conversation earlier from Jeff Teague about how the Orlando Magic could definitely take out a team like the New York Knicks, that maybe the Orlando Magic are a lot better than even the national media and sports books are giving them credit for? I actually believe there's a reality where the Orlando Magic are the second best team, and arguably, given the fact that they played the Cleveland Cavaliers so well 2 years ago, and Cleveland is not that much different than they were back then to where their roster construction is now. This team pushed them to 7 2 years ago, and that team looks basically the exact same, while the Orlando Magic have bolstered their roster across the board. I'm just saying maybe the Orlando Magic might be the top team in the Eastern Conference if you put everything together, body of work, also talent, paired with the fact that this team is coming into a league year where they probably improved the most out of anybody in the top 3. You can make an argument for what the Knicks did this summer, and Cleveland getting Lonzo Ball is a big deal if he's healthy. But I think when you talk about directly addressing your issues, the New York Knicks, Orlando Magic, and Atlanta Hawks all had the best off seasons of the summer amongst the top teams. I just think the Orlando Magic might have had a much more impactful one. But you guys let me know in that comment section down below. With that being said, this is the end of yet another Magic Latest podcast, and I will see you up again for the next episode with some more daily news. Peace.